I got the call on a Tuesday morning. Not from my daughter. Not from her husband. From a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, calm, almost rehearsed, told me that David had been admitted to St. Mary's Hospital the night before. Cardiac event. Serious. And then she said something that stopped me cold. She told me the family had already been notified. I asked her which family. She paused. Then she said, his family. And she hung up. I stood in my kitchen for exactly 3 seconds. Then I called my daughter, Maya. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she hadn't slept. I asked her if she knew. She said she'd been trying to get information since midnight. 12 hours. She had been sitting in the dark for 12 hours calling numbers that rang out, leaving messages that nobody returned, and driving to that hospital twice already, only to be turned away at the door. Not because visiting hours were over. Not because he was in surgery. Because someone had told the staff at that front desk that she was not immediate family. Her husband of 4 years. Not immediate family. I grabbed my keys before she finished the sentence. The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes. I know because I watched every minute on that dashboard clock. When I walked through her door, she was sitting on the floor of her hallway, still in yesterday's clothes, her phone in both hands like she was waiting for it to do something different this time. She looked up at me and didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I pulled her up off that floor and I told her we were going back to that hospital. Right now. Together. She told me they wouldn't let her in. I told her to get her coat. We pulled into that hospital car park just after 9 in the morning. Maya walked fast. Faster than I could keep up. Straight through those automatic doors, straight to that front desk. I watched her speak to the receptionist. I watched the receptionist's expression. Not unkind but firm. Practiced. Like she'd already had this conversation once today. She shook her head. She pointed to something on her screen. And I watched my daughter's shoulders drop in a way I hadn't seen since her father left us. I stepped up beside her. I asked the receptionist who had authorized the visitor restriction on David's room. She said she wasn't able to share that information. I asked her if my daughter's name appeared anywhere on David's file, as his wife, as his emergency contact, as anything. The receptionist looked at her screen for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she said, I'm sorry. The instructions we have are very clear. I looked at Maya. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were dry but only just. And that's when I felt it. Not panic, not anger, something colder than both of those. Because standing there at that desk, watching my daughter be erased from her own husband's life by a set of instructions nobody would explain, I suddenly remembered something. Something David had said to me almost a year ago at my kitchen table, over a cup of tea he barely touched. Something I had filed away and almost forgotten. He had told me he'd taken care of something, just in case. I hadn't known what he meant then. Standing in that hospital lobby, I was beginning to understand. I didn't say anything to Maya right away. Not in that lobby. Not with that receptionist watching us and a waiting room full of strangers sitting close enough to hear everything. I put my hand on Maya's arm, turned her around, and walked her back toward the entrance. She resisted for half a step. She wanted to fight, right there, right then, but I kept moving and she followed. Outside, the cold hit us both. Maya spun to face me the moment the doors slid shut behind us. She asked me what we were doing. I told her I needed to think. She said there was no time to think, that David was in there, that every minute we stood in a car park was a minute she wasn't with him. I told her I knew that. I also told her that going back to that desk without something concrete in our hands was going to get us nowhere. We'd already seen that. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she asked me what I was thinking. I told her about what David had said. The kitchen table. The cup of tea. The comment about having taken care of something just in case. I watched her face as I spoke. First she looked confused. Then something shifted. A flicker of recognition she couldn't quite place. She said he had mentioned something once months ago about paperwork. She hadn't asked questions because he'd said it in the same tone he used when he was sorting out car insurance or updating a password. Ordinary. Forgettable. She had forgotten it. I asked her if she knew where he kept important documents. She said at the flat. In the filing cabinet in the second bedroom. The one she always joked was his paper museum because he kept everything. Receipts, warranties, letters going back years. We got back in the car. On the drive to their flat, I asked her one question. I asked her who had called her the night before to tell her David had been taken to hospital. She said nobody had. She found out because a neighbor, a man who walked his dog past their building every evening, had seen the ambulance and texted her out of concern. She had called the hospital herself. They confirmed he was admitted, but said they couldn't give her information over the phone. She drove there at midnight. That was the first time they turned her away. I kept my eyes on the road and said nothing, but I was thinking about the woman who had called me that morning. Calm voice. Rehearsed words. His family has already been notified. Someone had made calls. Deliberate, organized calls. And not one of those calls had been to Maya. We reached the flat in under 15 minutes. Maya's hands were shaking slightly as she unlocked the door. Not from cold. We went straight to the second bedroom. She pulled open the filing cabinet and I stood beside her as she went through it. David was organized, she was right about that. Labeled dividers, folders in order, nothing loose. She moved through them quickly. Utilities. Tenancy. Car. Medical. She stopped at medical. She pulled the folder out and opened it on the desk. There were insurance documents on top. Prescription records. A letter from his GP. She lifted each one, set it aside. And then she stopped. She pulled out a single document. Cream-colored paper. Formal header. She read the top line and her breath caught. Audibly, sharply. The kind of sound a person makes when something knocks the air out of them without touching them. She turned to look at me. I took the document from her hands and read it myself. And I understood immediately why David had never made a big moment out of telling her about it. Because he had hoped, genuinely hoped, she would never need it. She needed it now. I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand it the first time. Because I needed to be certain before I said a single word to Maya. The kind of certain you need to be when everything riding on the next hour depends on you not being wrong. It was a lasting power of attorney document. Healthcare decisions. David had registered it through a solicitor 14 months ago. Maya's name was on it as the sole appointed person. Not his mother. Not his brother. Not anyone from his family. Maya, his wife. The only person legally authorized to make decisions about his medical care, if he was unable to make them himself. Maya was reading it over my shoulder. I heard her exhale, long and slow, and then she said his name. Just his name. Quietly. The way you say someone's name when you realize they did something for you before you even knew you needed it. I gave her 10 seconds. Then I told her we had to move. She took a photo of every page on her phone. I folded the original carefully and put it in my bag. We were back in the car in under 4 minutes. On the road, Maya called a number, her friend Priya, who worked in healthcare administration. Not a lawyer, but someone who knew how these documents worked, who had processed them, who understood exactly what weight they carried when you put them in front of a hospital. Priya picked up immediately. Maya read her the document title, the registration number, the date. Priya went quiet for a moment and then said 3 words. She said, "That's legally binding." Maya hung up and stared straight ahead through the windscreen. I pushed harder on the accelerator. What I hadn't said out loud yet, what I was turning over in my mind the entire drive, was the question of who had put that restriction on David's room in the first place. Because a hospital doesn't invent those instructions. Someone gives them. Someone walks in or calls in or fills in a form and puts a name on a list and takes another name off one. That takes effort. That takes intention. And it had happened fast. Within hours of David being admitted, before Maya had even confirmed he was there. That wasn't grief. That was a plan. We pulled back into the hospital car park at 11:23. I know the exact time because Maya said it out loud as we walked, said they kept her out for over 11 hours. She didn't say it with tears. She said it like she was filing it away, recording it. I noticed that and said nothing. Through the automatic doors. Crossed the lobby. Same receptionist at the front desk. She recognized us. I could see it in the slight adjustment of her posture. Maya walked up first this time. She didn't raise her voice. She placed her phone on the desk, document photograph facing up, and told the receptionist her full name, her relationship to the patient, and the registration number of the lasting power of attorney she held for her husband's healthcare decisions. The receptionist looked at the screen, looked at the phone, looked at Maya. Maya didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give her a single opening to redirect or deflect. The receptionist picked up her desk phone and made a call. She spoke quietly, her hand partially over the receiver. I caught 2 words: legal and directive. She put the phone down. She asked Maya to wait 1 moment. Then she stood up and walked through a door behind the desk. Maya turned to look at me. I looked back at her. Neither of us spoke, because the next person to come through that door was either going to let her in, or this was going to get much harder before it got better. We heard footsteps on the other side. He was not a doctor. That was the first thing I registered. No scrubs, no stethoscope, no lanyard with a department name. He wore a dark jacket, carried a clipboard, and had the kind of expression that people practice in front of mirrors, composed, professional, giving nothing away. He introduced himself as the hospital's patient liaison officer. He asked if we could step to one side. Maya didn't step to one side. She stayed exactly where she was and told him she wasn't moving until someone explained the legal basis for denying her access to her husband's room. She said it without blinking, flat and direct. I stood 1 step behind her and didn't say a word. The liaison officer glanced at his clipboard. Then he said there was a visitor directive on the patient's file, placed there by next of kin. Maya told him she was next of kin. He said the directive had been submitted by the patient's mother. Maya told him to look again at what she had just shown the receptionist. He hadn't seen it yet. The receptionist had called him before looking properly. I watched him read the photograph on Maya's phone, his eyes moving left to right, stopping, going back to the top. His clipboard lowered slightly. He asked if she had the original. I opened my bag and handed it to him. He read it again. Physical copy this time. Slower. Then he excused himself and went back through the door. Maya turned to me and said very quietly that she needed him to come back with a yes. Not a maybe. Not a we'll need to verify this. A yes. I told her the document was registered and dated and signed by a solicitor. There was nothing to verify. She nodded, but her jaw stayed tight. For minutes passed. I counted. Not deliberately, just the way you count things when you have nothing else to do with your hands and everything in the room feels like it's deciding something without you. The door opened again. The liaison officer came back, and this time a woman in a blue tunic walked with him. She introduced herself as the ward sister for the cardiac unit. She spoke directly to Maya. She told her the lasting power of attorney had been reviewed, and that it was valid and registered. She said she was sorry for the delay. She said Maya could come up to the ward immediately. Just like that. 11 hours and 40 minutes of closed doors and rehearsed apologies, and it ended with 4 sentences from a ward sister in a blue tunic. Maya didn't react the way I expected. No tears, no exhale of relief, no hand to the chest. She just said thank you, picked up her bag and asked which floor. 4th floor, cardiac unit, the ward sister said, and turned to lead us to the lift. I followed, but as I passed the front desk I looked at the receptionist. She was already looking at her screen. Whatever had been on it an hour ago, whatever instruction had been sitting there with Maya's name flagged. I didn't know if it had been removed or simply overridden. I didn't ask. In the lift, the 3 of us stood in silence. The ward sister pressed 4. The doors closed. Maya was looking straight ahead at her own reflection in the metal doors, and I watched her face do something I can only describe as go still. Not calm, still. The way a person looks when they are holding themselves together by sheer decision because they know that whatever is waiting on the other side of this lift door is going to require everything they have left. The lift stopped. The doors opened. And at the end of the corridor, room 412, the door was closed. The ward sister walked ahead of us down that corridor. I noticed she slowed slightly as we got closer to room 412. Not dramatically, just enough. The kind of slow that tells you something is already happening on the other side of that door that she knows about and we don't. She stopped outside the room. She turned to Maya and told her there were currently other visitors inside. She said it carefully, measured. Maya looked at the door handle and then back at the ward sister and asked how many. The ward sister said 3. Maya nodded once and pushed the door open herself. I stayed in the doorway. David's mother was standing at the left side of the bed. His brother Marcus was near the window, arms folded. A woman I didn't recognize sat in the chair closest to David's head. Older, heavy-set, wearing a coat like she had no intention of leaving. David was in the bed, propped slightly, eyes open. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner across the shoulders. Wires running from his chest to a monitor that beeped in slow, steady intervals. He saw Maya the moment she walked in. Nobody in that room said a word for a full 3 seconds. Then David's mother turned. She looked at Maya, then past her at me, then at the ward sister still standing in the doorway behind us. Her expression moved through several things quickly, surprise, calculation, something harder underneath both of those. She said Maya's name, not as a greeting. Maya didn't answer her. She walked straight to the right side of David's bed, opposite his mother, and she took his hand. David closed his fingers around hers immediately. Tightly, the way you hold something you thought you'd lost. He said her name. His voice was rough, lower than usual. He said it like an apology and a relief at the same time. His mother said something then. She said visiting was being managed carefully given David's condition, and that they were trying to keep things calm for him. She used the word they, as if she and Marcus and the woman in the coat were a medical team, as if Maya had wandered in off the street. Maya still didn't look at her. She was looking at David. I stepped fully into the room and let the door close behind me. The ward sister had gone. It was just us now, and whatever had been building in this room long before today was suddenly very present and very close to the surface. Marcus shifted his weight near the window. The woman in the coat watched Maya with an expression I couldn't read. David's mother took one step closer to the bed, not toward Maya, but enough to make the space feel contested. David spoke first. He looked at his mother and told her he wanted a few minutes alone with his wife. His voice was quiet, but there was no uncertainty in it. His mother started to respond. I heard the intake of breath, the beginning of a sentence, and David said it again. Few minutes. Please. The woman in the coat stood up first. Then Marcus moved away from the window. David's mother stayed one beat longer than the others, looking at Maya, then at her son, then at something on the blanket near his hand. Then she walked out. The door clicked shut. The monitor beeped. Once. Twice. Maya was still holding his hand. She sat down on the edge of the bed beside him and leaned her forehead briefly against his shoulder. He turned his face toward the top of her head. I moved to the far corner of the room to give them space. But I didn't leave. Because something in the way David had looked at the door as his family walked out, watchful, relieved but not entirely, told me this wasn't over. Not even close. David spoke quietly. Not because he was weak, because he didn't want his words traveling through walls. I understood that immediately. I moved closer to the window and kept my eyes on the corridor through the narrow glass panel in the door. If anyone came back, I would see them first. He told Maya he had known they would do this. Not suspected. Known. Maya pulled back slightly to look at his face. She asked him what he meant by that. He said his family had been making arrangements around him for months, quiet ones, the kind you only notice when you start paying attention to what's missing rather than what's there. Conversations that stopped when he entered rooms. Phone calls taken outside. His brother asking questions about the flat, whose name was on the lease, whether they had joint accounts, whether Maya worked full-time. Marcus had asked those questions over a family dinner 4 months ago. David had thought it was small talk. Later he realized it was inventory. Maya was very still as he spoke. She wasn't reacting. She was listening the way you listen when you're recording something, storing every word in the right order because you know you'll need it later. David said he'd made the power of attorney document quietly, through a solicitor his family didn't know, paid for from his personal account. He said he hadn't told Maya the details because he hadn't wanted to frighten her. He said he thought he was being careful without being alarming. He looked at her when he said that, and I could see from where I stood that he understood in that moment that not telling her had almost been the thing that cost them everything. Maya asked him one question. She asked him why they were doing this. He didn't answer immediately. The monitor beeped between them. Then he said there was something she didn't know. Something he had been trying to find the right moment to tell her for 3 months and had kept not telling her because every time he got close to it, the right moment disappeared. I turned from the window. He said his family believed the flat was in his name alone. It wasn't. They had both signed the tenancy jointly 2 years ago. But his mother had never accepted that. She had told people, relatives, her friends, their family solicitor, that David lived alone and that Maya was essentially a long-term guest. She had been building that version of events quietly and consistently for years. And when David got sick, when the cardiac episode happened and the ambulance came at 11 at night, his mother had arrived at the hospital within the hour and told them she was his only emergency contact. She had brought documentation, an old form, outdated, superseded, that listed her as next of kin, from before the marriage. The hospital had accepted it. David's voice stayed level as he said all of this, but his hand tightened around Maya's. I watched Maya's face. She didn't cry. She didn't look away from him. She asked him one more question, whether his mother knew about the power of attorney. He said no. Nobody did. Except the solicitor. And now us. Then he said something that I have not forgotten since. He said he was sorry for thinking that preparing quietly was the same as protecting her. He said he understood now that silence, even careful, well-meaning silence, leaves gaps. And people who want to cause damage will always find the gaps. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand once and stood up. She straightened her jacket. She turned to me and said we needed to speak to the ward sister again. Officially. Today. I was already at the door. Behind us, David watched her move and something in his face shifted. Something between relief and pride and a fear that wasn't gone yet. Just smaller than it had been an hour ago. The ward sister's name was Patricia. We found her at the nurse's station halfway down the corridor, writing in a folder. Maya walked up and said she needed to make an official record of the lasting power of attorney on David's hospital file. Not a request. A statement. Patricia looked up, set her pen down, and told us to follow her to the side room at the end of the corridor. Small room. 2 chairs, a desk, a computer. Patricia sat across from us and pulled up David's file on the screen. Maya placed the original document on the desk between them and gave her the solicitor's contact details on a folded piece of paper she had written in the lift on the way back from the room. She had thought of it while David was still talking. I hadn't even noticed her writing. Patricia scanned the document, typed something, picked up the desk phone and made a brief call. To the legal team, she said. Standard procedure for LPA registration on an active file. She was on the call for under 2 minutes. When she hung up, she told us the document would be logged on David's record within the hour, and that from that point forward all medical decisions, visitor authorizations, and information disclosures would require Maya's consent. Maya asked her directly what would happen to the existing visitor directive, the one David's mother had put in place. Patricia paused. Then she said that once the LPA was registered on the file, any conflicting directive from a non-authorized party would be superseded. She chose that word carefully. Superseded. Not removed. Not canceled. Superseded. The difference mattered and we all knew it. Maya asked for that in writing. Patricia looked at her for a brief moment, something between assessment and approval, and printed a single-page confirmation, signed it, and slid it across the desk. We walked back out into the corridor. I thought that was the hardest part done. I was wrong. David's mother was standing outside room 412 when we turned the corner. Not inside. Outside. Arms crossed, phone in her hand, positioned in the corridor like a person who had been waiting and had decided that waiting upright was better than waiting seated. She saw us coming from 20 feet away and didn't move. Maya didn't slow down. David's mother said she didn't know what Maya had said to the staff, but that she wanted it understood that everything she had done since last night had been for David's well-being. She said it loudly enough for the nurse passing behind us to hear. Maya stopped 2 feet in front of her. She didn't raise her voice. She told her mother-in-law that as of today she was the sole authorized person on David's medical file, and that any further attempts to restrict access or redirect information would be a legal matter, not a family one. David's mother stared at her. Then she looked at me. I looked back at her and said nothing because Maya didn't need me to say anything. Then something happened that I hadn't anticipated. David's mother's face didn't harden. It cracked briefly just at the edges, and underneath the strategy and the positioning and the carefully held posture, something else showed through. Something that looked almost like fear. Not of Maya. Not of the document. Of something else entirely. Something she hadn't said yet. She said David didn't know everything. Maya asked her what that meant. She looked down the corridor toward his room, then back at Maya. She said there were things about David's condition, things the doctors had told her last night before Maya arrived, that Maya needed to hear, and that she hadn't told David yet because she didn't want him to panic. The corridor went quiet around us. Maya's hand found my arm without looking for it. Maya didn't move, didn't speak. Her hand stayed on my arm and I felt her fingers press down once. Not from fear, from decision. She was deciding how much to trust what was coming next. I was deciding the same thing. David's mother said the cardiologist had spoken to her at 2 in the morning. She said the cardiac episode had caused damage. Not minor. Significant. The kind that changes what comes next, what's possible, what isn't, what the timeline looks like going forward. She said the word timeline like she'd been rehearsing it. Like she'd turned it over enough times to make it sound clinical instead of what it actually was. Maya asked her why she hadn't called her with this information. David's mother said she hadn't wanted to cause panic over the phone. Maya looked at her for a long moment and then said very quietly that she had been sitting outside this building for 11 hours. That panic over the phone would have been preferable to 11 hours of silence. David's mother didn't respond to that. She looked at the floor briefly. Then she said the cardiologist's name was Dr. Okafor, and that he was due to do his rounds in the next 40 minutes. She said Maya should be there for that conversation. She said it like she was granting something. Maya said she would be there because she was legally required to be consulted on all medical decisions, and walked past her into David's room. I followed. The door closed. David looked at us both when we came in. He read our faces before either of us spoke. He asked what had happened in the corridor. Maya sat beside him and told him plainly. The LPA was on his file, the ward sister had confirmed it in writing, and his mother had just told us the cardiologist had information from last night that we hadn't heard yet. David went still. He asked what kind of information. Maya told him she didn't know yet. That they would hear it together in 40 minutes from Dr. Okafor directly. David nodded. He didn't press for more. He just shifted slightly in the bed and kept hold of her hand and looked at the middle distance the way people look when they are bracing for something they cannot yet see the shape of. Those 40 minutes were the longest of the morning. I sat in the corner. Maya sat beside David. They talked quietly, not about the family, not about the document, not about any of it. About small things. Their cat. A television program they'd been watching before all of this. Whether the downstairs neighbor had fixed his bicycle yet. Ordinary things said in a room with a cardiac monitor and wires and the low hum of hospital equipment. I didn't listen closely. It wasn't mine to hear. At 12:41 the door opened. Dr. Okafor was younger than I expected. Calm, unhurried, a tablet in one hand. He introduced himself to Maya first. He had clearly already been updated about the LPA, and then acknowledged me with a nod. He pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down at eye level with David rather than standing over him. I noticed that. It told me something about how serious the conversation was going to be. He spoke clearly and without softening the edges too much. The cardiac episode had caused damage to the left ventricle. Not catastrophic, but substantial. There were treatment options. 2 of them. One was medication management, lower risk, slower recovery, less certainty of full function returning. The other was a procedure, interventional, more direct, better long-term outcomes statistically but carrying its own risks given David's current condition. He said the decision needed to be made within 72 hours. He looked at Maya when he said it, not at David's mother, who had quietly appeared in the doorway behind Dr. Okafor while he was speaking. At Maya. David's mother stepped into the room before Dr. Okafor had finished speaking. Nobody invited her. She moved to the foot of the bed and stood there with her hands clasped in front of her like she was attending something formal. Dr. Okafor glanced back at her briefly, then at Maya. Maya gave him a single nod that said keep going. He turned back to his tablet and continued. He outlined the procedure. A catheter-based intervention, minimally invasive relative to open surgery, targeting the damaged section of the left ventricle directly. Success rate was strong in patients David's age and baseline health. The risks were real but calculable. Without it, the medication route was manageable but the long-term cardiac function picture was significantly less favorable. He used the words quality of life twice. He did not use them lightly. David asked him which option he would recommend. Dr. Okafor said that clinically, the procedure gave David the better outcome. But he said the decision belonged to David and to Maya as his appointed healthcare decision-maker, and that he wanted them to have time to discuss it privately before giving him an answer. He said 72 hours was the window. He stood, handed Maya a printed summary of both options with his contact extension at the bottom, and left the room. David's mother spoke the moment the door closed. She said the procedure was too risky. She said she had looked it up the night before, and the complication rates were not what the doctor was presenting. She said David should take the medication route and come home. To her home she specified, not the flat, to recover properly. She said all of this in under 30 seconds, standing at the foot of his bed, as if the last 2 hours hadn't happened at all. David looked at her. Then he looked at Maya. Maya asked his mother to leave the room. His mother said she had a right to be part of this conversation. Maya told her clearly and without raising her voice that she did not. That legally and medically she did not. She held up the printed confirmation from Patricia, the one that said superseded, and told her that if she needed it explained further, the ward sister was 40 feet down the corridor. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind his mother. He'd been somewhere in the hospital this whole time. I hadn't seen him since the room earlier. He looked at the paper in Maya's hand, then at his mother. Something passed between them that I couldn't read but that clearly meant something to both of them. David's mother left. Marcus followed. The door clicked shut for the second time that morning with the same sound but carrying entirely different weight. David exhaled. Long and slow. He looked at the ceiling for a moment and then back at Maya and said he wanted the procedure. He said it plainly without drama, the way someone speaks when they've already decided and just needed the room to clear before they said it out loud. Maya looked at him carefully. She asked him if he was certain. He said yes. She asked him if he was saying it because he actually wanted it or because his mother had just argued against it. He almost smiled at that. He said both probably, but mostly the first one. Maya picked up Dr. Okafor's card from the bedside table. She told David she was going to find him now and confirm. David said okay. She stood up, smoothed the front of her jacket, and looked at me. I told her I'd stay with David. She walked out. The room went quiet. Just the monitor, the low hum of the building, and David looking at the door she'd just gone through. After a moment he said something I wasn't expecting. He said he needed to tell me something about Marcus. Something that hadn't come up yet. Something he hadn't even told Maya. I pulled my chair closer to the bed. David didn't rush into it. He looked at the door once, checking it was fully closed, and then he looked at me with the kind of expression that tells you whatever is coming has been sitting on someone's chest for a long time and has finally found the moment to come out. He said Marcus had contacted their family solicitor 3 weeks ago. Not about the cardiac episode, this was 3 weeks before any of that. He had contacted him about David's estate. specifically about what would happen to David's assets in the event of his death without a formal will. David knew because the solicitor, an older man who had known David since childhood and whose loyalty ran deeper than the family assumed, had called David directly the day after Marcus's visit and told him what had been discussed. I asked David if he had a will. He said no. He had the LPA but no formal will. He had been meaning to do it, had thought about it, had even spoken to the same solicitor about starting one, but had kept deferring it the way people defer things that force them to think about their own death. He was 37. It had felt distant. To Marcus, apparently, it did not feel distant at all. Without a will, David explained, intestacy rules applied. And under those rules in their jurisdiction, a spouse inherited the majority of the estate. But certain assets, particularly those in sole names, moved through a more complex process that a determined family could contest and delay almost indefinitely. Marcus hadn't been asking about David's death in the abstract. He had been asking about the flat, the car, the savings account that was still in David's name alone from before the marriage. He had been building a case before there was even a crisis to attach it to. I sat with that for a moment. The cardiac episode hadn't started this, it had just accelerated it. Handed them an opportunity they had already been quietly preparing for. David said he had called the solicitor back the day after that conversation and told him to begin drafting a will immediately. That had been 18 days ago. The draft existed but hadn't been signed yet. David had been waiting for a specific clause to be revised, something about a property his grandmother had left him that required careful wording. The solicitor had sent a revised version 4 days ago. It was sitting in David's email unread, because 4 days ago he had been dealing with a work deadline and had told himself he'd look at it over the weekend. The weekend had become this. I asked him if Maya knew about any of this, the Marcus visit, the solicitor, the draft will. He said no. He had been handling it quietly, the same way he had handled the LPA. Same instinct. Same mistake. I didn't say that to him. He already knew it. I told him that the moment he was well enough, the first thing we were going to do was get that will signed. He said he knew. Then he said something else. He said he wanted Maya to know all of it. Everything. Not from him finding the right moment. From him deciding that there were no right moments, only decisions. He said he was done with quiet preparation she didn't know about. That the last 24 hours had shown him that her not knowing wasn't protection. It was exposure. The door opened. Maya came back in. She had found Dr. Okafor. The procedure was confirmed for the day after tomorrow, pending one final assessment in the morning. She sat down beside David and told him. He nodded. Then he looked at her and said there was something he needed to tell her. That it was about Marcus. That she needed to hear it. Maya looked at me briefly. I gave her nothing, it was his to tell. She turned back to David and said she was listening. David told her everything. He didn't soften it or sequence it carefully or find a way to make it land gently. He told her about Marcus visiting the solicitor. He told her about the intestacy rules and the specific assets Marcus had asked about. He told her about the draft will sitting in his email for 4 days. He told it to her in order plainly, watching her face as he spoke the way someone watches a road they're not sure is stable enough to drive on. Maya listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she picked up her phone, opened his email app. He gave her the password without being asked, found the solicitor's email, and read the draft will in full. It took her 6 minutes. I watched the clock on the wall because I had nothing else to do with my eyes. She put the phone down. She asked David 2 questions. First, was the solicitor trustworthy? David said yes, completely. The man had called him unprompted to warn him about Marcus. Second, could the will be signed before the procedure? David said he didn't know. Maya said she was going to find out. She called the solicitor from the hospital room. His name was Mr. Harding. She introduced herself, referenced the draft, and asked him directly whether the document could be executed at the hospital bedside before Thursday morning. Mr. Harding said yes. He had done bedside signings before, it was not uncommon, He would need 2 witnesses and David would need to be assessed as mentally competent to sign, which given the circumstances was a straightforward process the hospital could facilitate. Maya asked him if tomorrow morning worked. He said he would make it work. She hung up and looked at David. He looked back at her. Then he said her name and stopped. Not because he didn't know what to say next, but because what he wanted to say was too large for the space a sentence could hold. Maya shook her head slightly, which meant she understood and he didn't need to find the words right now. I looked out of the window at the car park 4 floors below and gave them a moment that wasn't mine. What none of us had accounted for was Marcus. He had been in the hospital this whole time. I had registered that earlier and then lost track of him in the movement of the day. At 3:47 in the afternoon, he knocked on the door of room 412 and opened it before anyone answered. He looked different from the morning. The folded arms were gone. He stood in the doorway with his hands at his sides and his face doing something uncomfortable and unfamiliar, something that didn't sit naturally on it. He asked if he could speak to David alone. David looked at Maya. Maya looked at Marcus. Then she stood up and said she would be just outside, and looked at David in a way that told him she wasn't going far, and that he should call her name if he needed to. She walked out. I followed her into the corridor and pulled the door to. Not fully shut, just pulled to. We stood outside. Neither of us spoke. After about 90 seconds we heard Marcus's voice through the gap. Not the words, just the tone. Lower than usual. Less certain. The rehearsed quality gone. Then David's voice, shorter, steadier. Then silence. Then Marcus again, and this time I caught 3 words clearly through the gap in the door. He said I was wrong. Another silence. Longer this time. Then the door opened and Marcus came out. He looked at Maya in the corridor and opened his mouth to say something. Closed it. Looked at the floor. Then he walked away down the corridor toward the lift without looking back. Maya watched him go. Then she pushed the door open and went back to David. Mr. Harding arrived at 9:15 the following morning. Small man, gray suit, a leather document case that looked older than both of us. He introduced himself to the ward sister at the nurse's station, produced his credentials without being asked, and was taken to David's room with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before and understood that in these situations, speed mattered more than ceremony. The hospital's duty doctor came in first. Brief assessment. 10 minutes, a few questions, a signature on a form confirming David's mental competency to execute a legal document. David answered every question clearly and without hesitation. The doctor signed. The duty doctor left. Mr. Harding opened his case. Maya and I served as witnesses. We signed where we were told to sign. David signed last, slowly, deliberately, with the hand that didn't have the cannula. Mr. Harding dated each page, applied his seal, and told David the document was valid and binding from that moment. He said he would register it formally from his office that afternoon. He closed his case, shook David's hand, nodded to Maya, and left the room in under 30 minutes total. David looked at the ceiling for a moment after he left. Then he said it was done. Just that. It's done. The procedure happened the following morning at 7. We weren't allowed in the room for that part. Maya and I sat in a waiting area on the 3rd floor with 2 cups of coffee that went cold between us. Maya didn't look at her phone. She sat with her hands around the cup and her eyes on the middle distance and said almost nothing for 2 hours and 14 minutes. I didn't try to fill the silence. There was nothing to put in it that would have helped. Dr. Okafor came through the double doors at 9:22. He walked toward us and Maya stood before he reached us. He told her the procedure had gone well. No complications. David was in recovery. She could see him in approximately an hour. Maya sat back down. She put her face in her hands, not crying, just somewhere private for a moment that nobody else needed access to. I put my hand on her back and left it there. David's mother was in the waiting area too. She had been there when we arrived, sitting on the far side of the room, and we had not spoken. When Dr. Okafor delivered his news, I saw her shoulders drop from across the room. Genuine relief, whatever else was true about her. She loved her son. That had never been the question. The question had always been what she was willing to do in the name of that love, and whether she understood the difference between protecting someone and consuming them. She left the waiting area without speaking to us. 3 days later, David was discharged. He came home to the flat, their flat, and Maya had changed nothing about it except that there were fresh flowers on the kitchen table, which she said she had bought for herself and not for the occasion. David laughed at that. It was the first time I had heard him laugh in a week, and it sounded exactly like it always had. I stayed for dinner that first night. We ate at their kitchen table and talked about ordinary things, and nobody mentioned the hospital or the document or Marcus or any of it. Not because it was forbidden, because for one evening it didn't need to be the thing in the center of the room. I drove home late, sat in my car outside my house for a few minutes before going in, not thinking about anything specific, just sitting with the particular kind of tired that isn't about sleep, the kind that comes from watching someone you love walk through something that could have gone the other way and didn't. I went inside. I made tea. I sat down. And I thought about David at my kitchen table 14 months ago, barely touching his cup, telling me he had taken care of something, just in case. He had been right to.